I'll just start with a couple of questions, and the first question will be, when did you start martial arts?
Oh, jeez, yeah. A long time ago.
Yeah, it's alright to show your age.
In a galaxy far, far away. Probably standing on a judo mat, standing on a judo mat as a 7 or 8 year old kid in Kilmarnock.
Yeah.
When judo was very uncool. And I had to dash quickly from the house to the car wearing my gi before the rest of the kids in the street gave me pelters about it because I wasn't playing football with them in the street. So that was probably my first experience in martial arts was judo as a kid for 3 or 4 years.
Yep. And when did you pick it up again after that?
I went straight away. I basically moved from judo because at that time I didn't think it was very cool. Striking arts were the cool arts back then.
Yeah.
I didn't see the value in the grappling arts back then. Whereas now, I wish I'd stuck with the judo from that age. But I went from there. I went to Taekwondo for a couple of years. Not even a couple of years. That's maybe a year and a half. Again, followed my friends. Where my friends went, I would go to wherever they went next. So I went boxing. So we went to boxing after that, and then made the natural progression from boxing to kickboxing, and basically stayed at kickboxing from then right up until I moved to Australia in 2005. I was still doing a form of Chinese kickboxing, Hauga kickboxing. I was doing traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu for about 4 or 5 years then as well, up until I came here. That was basically my martial arts story before I got to Australia. Boxing, kickboxing, and Japanese jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, that's a pretty solid mix. And then when you got to Australia, who did you train with here?
When I got to Australia, I started training with Daniel Lima at Fight Club.
Yep.
I'd went to Japanese jiu-jitsu in Scotland because there was no Brazilian jiu-jitsu clubs for me in the area I was to train BJJ, and I was doing the kickboxing at the time. I just wanted to add the ground game. UFC was fashionable. It wasn't fashionable at that time actually. It definitely wasn't fashionable, but it was fashionable in my house. And I wanted to do all this stuff that I seen them doing in the canvas, and I looked for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu clubs, and there was only one place in Scotland I could find, and it was in Edinburgh, which is in the east coast of Scotland. I lived in the west coast of Scotland, and it was like over an hour's drive each way, which by Australian standards isn't a long drive at all, but by Scottish standards you would never drive an hour to go somewhere. It's like driving to the other side of the country. So I went and joined a traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu club in Ayr, ran by a kid called Tommy, who was a couple of years younger than me, who'd learned jiu-jitsu in the army, and done a lot of commando jiu-jitsu. Most of it was based around about stuff that he'd brought out the forces with him, and it was really good fun. And it was introduced me to grappling. He was very leg lock oriented.
Yep.
As well as, obviously everything was standing and that. There was a lot of striking, but as soon as I hit the ground, there was a lot of leg locks. And when I came to Australia, I started training at Fight Club. At that point in time, Fight Club was in 5 Rings. 5 Rings was in Mermaid Beach, and Daniel was just renting some mat space in 5 Rings. And I started training there in 2005. And moved a couple of times with Daniel as well. He then bought or leased the building next door, and they converted it and kept going to 5 Rings for a while. Went and competed quite often through 2005, 2006 and maybe 2007 when I was training at Daniel's. And then I went home to Scotland for a little while. My mum took me up well, and throughout the course of 1 year I was there quite often. Didn't do any training at all. When I moved back to Australia, I was up the north end of the coast, and it was just too much travel again for me with the situation with my family at the time to head back down to train at 5 Rings. So I started training at Puma in Southport. So I started training at Puma in Southport, and to this day I'm still with Puma. Puma in Southport closed, and I moved down to Burleigh, and travelled up and down down the M1 to train with Vince.
Yeah, Vince is pretty easy company. And Daniel Lima would actually be, when I started training, he was my favourite Australian fighter. You know, like, I mean, he was fighting in Shooto at that point in time, and you know, like, he was a little devil. You know, like, and you know, shout out to Daniel Lima and how much of a beast he was, and I'm just hoping that one day your students will all have the same courage as him, because he's an absolute weapon. So if there's anyone out there from Fight Club and you're not competing, then you're doing yourself a disservice, and your coach as well, to get out there and get after it. There's my stab at those guys.
He's such a nice guy as well. I remember always pestering Daniel. At that point in time, Fight Club was all just a jiu-jitsu gym.
Yeah.
And primarily still a jiu-jitsu gym. Now, pester him about MMA and MMA.
Oh man, he was the little devil. It was a perfect name for him. Perfect name. And Vince is easy company too, right? Like, he's so easy to hang around, which is good. And now you promote shows on the Gold Coast.
Yes, now obviously I'm promoting shows. I was too old to fight, still wanted involved. Decided that I would start promoting shows. It was actually a funny story how I started promoting the first show. I was actually sitting at a CFC with a couple of my mates from Scotland. At Southport Sharks, ironically enough. So we're sitting in the crowd. that whole night is so many funny stories about it. The two boys that was, in fact, it was the three boys that was with from Scotland, all grew up with the same sort of background as me, from lower than working class housing schemes in Scotland, and we appreciate sense of humour differently from a lot of people, and we'd have a bit to drink, and an argument ensued amongst the four of us about whether or not this was a good show or whether it wasn't a good show, or like, you can do better then, you do better. And then I ended up 3 months later I had a show booked, and I wondered why the hell I decided to put my hand up and say that I was gonna take on the role of a MMA promoter.
Yeah.
The thankless role of an MMA promoter.
Yeah, it can be at times, because it's, like you said, it can be a tough business to make money in, and I understand that, and even more now, coaching, understanding that, you know, while you might be arguing over the difference, getting paid $1,000 and $1,500 for a fight at the entry level, my advice to fighters would be, get the right fight at the right time, and don't worry about the $500. You should have a part-time job that's good enough that you're not arguing over $500 with your promoter. Get the right opponent at the right time, and make sure that you build the story around your career properly.
There's so many different angles you can look at that as well. You know, whereas, I mean, me and my business partner Ben have both said, you know, we would love to pay people more money. We know we're not paying people the money that they deserve. The issue is the money isn't there to give them. You know, we can't give them what we don't have.
Yeah.
And whereas, for the example you give there, you know, the $1,000 and the $1,500, it doesn't sound like a great deal to that one individual when he's talking about an increase in his purse, like, I'm worth $1,500. Then you think, well, that's a 50% increase on your purse. If we were to do that to there's 14 fights in the card, the other 27 people that are on the card, and give them a 50% increase in their purse as well, because they were to do it, all of a sudden, you know, there's no financial.
Well, it's 10, 20 people that are visiting the show as well, depending on the ticket prices as well. So, you know, like, it's really around how many people you actually bring to the show. If you're an out of town fighter, you're actually not bringing anyone. No. You're not bringing anyone to the show.
You're just incurring a cost.
You're just incurring the cost, and it's not great. But you're in it for the wrong reasons otherwise. So you either need, if you want to make money from it, you need to be in it to be a champion, because only the top 2% make any money.
Yeah.
So, you know, like, people need to stop selling these dreams to these kids, and it needs to be about the martial art first. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, I think, as we go on too, because right now you're actually in Townsville.
Yep.
Studying to be a firefighter as well.
Yeah, which is, it's been a steep learning curve for me. I'm not a spring chicken, and I've been a long time very comfortable in the roles that I have been doing, and I've always been very confident and very established in anything that I have went into, whereas this is just completely new to me. It's a completely different level of training that I'm having to, a different level of commitment that I'm having to put in 5 days a week, and I'm enjoying the change. I'm enjoying Townsville.
Now, do you think being a martial artist has helped you on that course?
I'm not sure. Maybe the way that I think about things and the way that I can break things down into logical steps. You do this, then you do that, then you do the next thing. Possibly, yeah. But physically, I've definitely let myself go a lot further than what I hoped to have done. We know before, pre-COVID, I'd come down to Courage and I was looking to train again, and I was starting to get a little bit of fitness back, which would have helped me on this course. But with things being the way that they are just now, and us unable to, to go to the gym, it's physically it's been pretty difficult for me, especially at my age. But no, I'm getting there.
Yep. Yeah, because sometimes that's the thing that I'm interested in most is like whether people can or can't make their training adaptable to other things that they do. And I think sometimes it can come down to the coaching that you've received along the way, whereas you could sit there and I can teach someone to throw a nice jab cross hook over and over, but if I don't talk to my students about the value in repetition and training when you're not at the gym and all these other things, then it could be possible that I'm not actually affecting their life. And for me, like, the greatest gift that I could give my students would be to affect their life.
Yeah, outside of the gym.
Outside of the gym after that, especially if we talked about promoting and the fact that, like only the top 2% of people that I come through are going to fight professionally and have a chance to even make a career or money or anything out of that, or become instructors that run gyms. So I really think that it's interesting to see whether people are doing that yet or not. I think maybe you might even be using it more than you think.
Possibly. And look, I think I use other skills and other thought processes that I've learned, not just through martial arts, but just training under specific coaches that I've had. For example, Vince Berry's probably the biggest influence on my day-to-day behaviour that I've had since I moved to Australia. Obviously, moving out here with a young family and not having anybody, not having any, sort of parents or counsel round about me to bounce ideas off of or to speak to when I maybe had difficult decisions to make. I always went to Vince with that, and we know Vince's outlook in life and how sensibly he thinks about things and gives advice, and a lot of the teachings and a lot of the ways of thinking that he's impressed upon me, I do use in a day-to-day business.
Yeah, that's important, right? And that a lot of people have said that about Vince, so it's nice to hear that about Vincent again.
Yeah, such a good guy.
Because it makes a big difference too. Right now, we're all stuck, not able to go to our gyms, and people are missing that kind of avenue of advice. Like maybe you don't have someone in your family that you can go to with, a problem like that, but your coach is probably going to tell you, well, hey man, like if you lost your job, what are you doing drinking on the weekend? You should be in here training. I don't mind training you for free for a week or two, but stop acting like a dropkick. Whatever that advice be, that's valuable.
Yeah, it's accountability. All of a sudden, you're accountable to somebody, and there's people who usually take their positions, head coaches at gyms. You'll usually find they're of a certain moral compass. They're definitely seem to think about things a lot more sensibly and a lot more rationally than a lot of other people.
Yeah, hopefully. What would be your advice to young amateur fighters that wanted to fight on Eternal?
Well, they've never had any fights before. Just listen to your coaches. Make sure that they think you're ready. It doesn't matter how you feel. If you're not getting the feedback from your coach that you're not ready, then you're not ready. When you are ready, Make sure you choose a sensible weight that you don't need to hurt yourself to get to. There's no point at that level to be cutting weight. Just let's be sensible about what weight you're going to fight at. Let's commit yourself properly to the preparation to get there, whether it be your 6 or your 8 weeks notice that you have of the fight. Let's take yourself seriously for the 6 or 8 weeks. You're putting yourself in a position where somebody could possibly hurt you. So don't give yourself the best chance you can to win that fight. So take yourself seriously for the 6 or 8 weeks, and enjoy it. Just enjoy the whole process. If it's something that you're not enjoying doing, you shouldn't be doing it. It's as simple as that. So make sure you turn up to the fight on weight, on time, and with a smile on your face.
And here's an interesting one, which everybody's interesting question that probably a lot of people got different opinions on. What would be your best advice to the professionals that want to fight in the UFC?
Professionals fighting regionally in Australia.
Yeah, professionals that are fighting regional in Australia that want to get to the big show.
Take the hard fights.
Yeah.
Take the hard fights. Don't hide from any. If you're trying to hide from somebody regionally or nationally, why are you even dreaming of going above that level? Take the hard fights. Get a good understanding of what your level's at, and learn from it. Take something out of every single fight that you're in.
Yeah, that's great advice. And it's something that I used to do. If I won 2 fights, I'd fight almost anyone on my roster at my weight.
Yeah.
Because I'd won 2 in a row. I think, 1, 2 in a row. If I lose this next one, it'll be all right.
Yeah.
But then if I'd lost one, I'd be kind of thinking, well, maybe I should be fighting someone of the same experience as me this time.
Yeah.
And just trying to be sensible about it on the way through.
That definitely changes things, because you don't want, if you're in that position where you're coming off a loss, and if your confidence is taking a knock, if you're maybe questioning more than just your ability in that last fight, but your whole reasoning for doing what you're doing, take the 50-50 fight. Don't go less than the 50-50, but take the 50-50 fight. You've got nothing to gain from winning.
Well, you'll never get anything. You'll never get anything better than 50-50 anyway. Unless you're the
numerically.
Unless your coach is the promoter. And we've all seen that.
Definitely. Yeah. And look, that probably swings us back to another situation. Even with my daughter Casey. She used to get asked all the time, your dad will give you an easy fight, or your dad will give you that. It's the exact opposite. I give her the hardest fights. You think when she started fighting, I wanted her to spend as long as she does doing it. I mean, she now lives in Thailand full time. She's dedicated her whole life to this. She had her first fight at 16 years old as a female against an adult who had 4 or 5 fights. And I said to her back then when we were doing it, that let's find out very early if this is for you, because why are you going to waste a long time of your life doing something that isn't for you? If your goal is to get the UFC, and if your goal is to go and fight in Japan, let's find out early. Let's take the tough fights. Let's not spend a lot of time fluffing about, not making any progress.
I do that a little bit with my students. You're not allowed to fight until you're ready.
Yeah.
And then when you fight, just be aware that you might fight someone with up to 6 fights.
Yeah.
You're on. If I have a beginner to debut against someone that's 3-3, I'm good with that.
Yeah.
If that person loses 50% of the time, and you know that they can fight sometimes and not other times.
Yeah.
That's a perfect match for your first fight, because you'll get to know whether you're actually ready to fight or not. People will be like, but the experience. I'm like, well, I'm telling you now, if you're not ready to fight a fighter, you're not ready to fight.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting kind of thought process. And, I've even been accused by other coaches on the grapevine for holding guys back. Holds guys back. So I wait until they can actually fight before they can fight. That's
the difference.
That's the difference. It's a standard for the team, but not only a standard for the team, but for the person. And I think what you did with Casey was great, and it's obviously
it's reaping benefits now.
It's reaping benefits for her now. Like, she looks like she can fight because she went there and for the first fight knew that she had to actually be able to fight.
Yeah.
You know, and it pays long-term benefits. So if you're a coach out there that wants to make champions, then don't let people fight until they can actually fight.
Yeah.
You know, if they're flinching in the gym and you haven't even got rid of the flinch response, it's your duty of care to tell that person no.
Yeah.
You know, and if you're not telling that person no, or those parents of that person no, then as far as I'm concerned, you're being a little bit negligent as a coach.
Yeah. A lot of people like the idea of fighting, but don't actually like fighting.
Oh, well, and why would you?
Yeah.
It's, like, it's
fighting,
it's not surfing.
Yeah. I hate surfing.
It's fighting, not surfing. What it can do for you personally is amazing. But in saying that, like, it's not for everyone long term. And it's a pretty common story that people have 2 or 3 and give it up,
Yeah.
But, Australia's getting there. We have a great history in striking sports, and now we've got great world-class grapplers at ADCC doing really well. So I think with shows like yours and people opening up gyms that really have no nonsense coaches that have been through the fire before, like, it's a great time to be in martial arts.
I think Australia and New Zealand are really hot just now, especially in the world scene per capita. When you look at the populations that Australia and New Zealand have got, and the amount of success that they're having across all combat sports compared to the success some other nations are having, they've got much.
And I think Alex Volkanovski and Robert Whittaker are the tip of the iceberg. We've been there with a few other people that weren't quite successful. We learned those 2 guys came up at just the right time. That they might be the first couple of guys that were really fully well developed by great coaches that have invested a lot of time and energy into them, and they've stayed humble and respectful the whole time to be able to reach that level. So I think they're the tip of the iceberg.
Without a doubt. I mean, Volkanovski just now, his fight intelligence is just through the roof. I mean, the way that he fought Holloway, just so smart. He's just looking fantastic just now. And Robert Whittaker, obviously, he's going through a bit of a rough time just now, but Robert Whittaker as well has looked outstanding against some of the most dangerous fighters on the planet across 2 weight classes. I think everybody kind of. I remember him standing, getting interviewed after the fight, and he said something about it. I think it was he enjoyed Hungry Jacks too much. He was going to move up a weight class. He wasn't going to cut to welterweight anymore. And everybody was just like, "Oh, you'll be small at middleweight." And, he wore the world championship belt round about his waist.
Yeah.
And obviously, all the boys coming out of City Kickboxing just now. I mean, they're churning out so many high quality fighters just now. Kai Kara France, Agile, Dan Hooker.
Yeah.
There's some fantastic talent coming from this.
Yeah, and they've had other good coaches. Eugene Behrman, I know, gets a big rap over there, but it's nice that like a lot of those guys, that have all come together. A lot of them came through Carl Weber as well. He's been doing great things in New Zealand for a long time. It's great to see him corner those guys a bit as well. I'm a big fan of guys like Dan Hooker and that fought a lot in Australia as well. So I'm pumped for the future.
No doubt. We've got a lot of really exciting. I mean, even just in Eternal, we've got so many people just now coming through that I actually think can make it. At that level.
Oh, they're good. They're definitely at that level.
Fighters coming through across a lot of weight classes, and the funny thing is, when I came to Australia in 2005, it was all big boys. It was all middleweight and above. Whereas now, from flyweights up, there's some fantastic talents and some really standing divisions.
And people should be looking at other comps too, around Asia, like ONE FC and Ryzen, and just taking whatever international fights you can, because this whole idea of I'm just UFC or I'm just doing that, and if you get an international opportunity, take it, because you're in a small percentage of people right then and there, and you'll find your way to and through those big shows from those big shows anyway, because I think it's just silly if you get offered a fight in Japan to not take it because you want to fight in the UFC, because you could have your shoulder ripped out in your next fight, or you could be spiked on your neck, and like you only get so many chances. So take the chances that you get.
And you want these war stories to tell your kids and your grandkids in 20 years' time. How you went to Japan and you fought in this big show in front of 50,000 people or in front of 60,000
Oh,
people.
100%.
You know, and the likes of these shows that you mentioned, Rising and Deep and Pancrase even still. You know,
Pancrase is still going. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Across Europe, I mean, there's some great shows in Europe just now as well. There's shows popping up all over the place just now. I mean, there's that new Aries show. It's got a lot of heavy investment in it, coming out of I think it's coming out of Africa and France. Then you've obviously KSW expanding now outside of Poland. They're looking to do a show in the UK. You know, there's a lot of options for people.
It's exciting. Thanks for the chat.